Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the chart here, yesterday, satellite imagery, we had a pretty good storm. Actually, the low center well to the north there, passing eastward, with the front dropping down across the Arctic coast there into the North Slope area to the Brooks Range, with rain from that location on back. Pretty gusty winds with that earlier in the day, dropping off considerably in the afternoon. Sunny, warm temperatures here across the Kuskokwim Valley down into Bristol Bay, and sunny and warm, but not quite as warm as they were back to the west here, Copper River Basin, all of southern Alaska up into the Tanana Valley, where there were more mid and high level clouds passing by. Southeast coast yesterday still under the influence of a cold upper low that was still producing some showers down in that area with clouds and cool temperatures. That moving east and dissipating. You'll see today still some clouds early on here, but looks like most of the showers have passed on to the east there with dry conditions and clearing skies in some areas there for the southeast coast, although a lot of low clouds and fog up along the North Gulf Coast from Valdelphin Cove back to the west, but mostly off the coast here, although low clouds socked in across Prince William Sound earlier today. And then that next system driving eastward, bringing a good shot of rain in across the northwest interior. Selawik picking up 1.5 inches of rain in the last 24 hours, with Ambler and Kiana both picking up about 1.25 inches of rain. Otherwise, Kotzebue had about 1/2 inch, with Deering at about 1/3 inch of rain there. And even to the east today, northern Koyukuk Valley, north end of the Koyukuk River, about 4/10 inch of rain falling there. And also areas in the North Slope picking up some pretty good rainfall as well, up to 4/10 inch, heavier back to the west. Thought there'd be some gale force gusts ahead of this front as it pushed eastward. Actually, there were storm force gusts. Cape Lisburne reported a gust late last night of about 60 miles an hour ahead of that front as it pushed on through. Otherwise, 20 to 40 mile an hour wind associated with this up to the north, diminishing behind the front here. Band of rain down across the Yukon Delta, Nunivak Island, all the way back, just getting into the Pribilofs there. Otherwise, not too bad here over Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula. Fog on Alaska, drizzle, low clouds, areas of fog out over the western central Aleutians. Now the sunny, warm temperatures, 70s and to mid 80s occurring here over the south central Alaska area, Susitna Valley, into the Copper River Basin, as well as up into the eastern Tanana Valley 40-mile country there, but a little bit cooler due to the cloud cover back to the west. And the southeast coast, again, low clouds and fog out along the coast, but dry for the most part today, with all the shower activity pulling off to the east there, with the upper low weakening as it moves in, with just mostly cloudy skies, but some increasing amounts of sunshine going on there. That'll continue through tonight. Look for possible drizzle in the low clouds here. Up along the north coast, again, in toward Elfin Cove, pretty vulnerable there. Not so much for Sitka, Port Alexander. It'll be a dry evening with maybe more clearing here over the central and southern areas. Back to the north, isolated showers possible near the passes. Excuse me, look for increase in the clouds here, south central Alaska on those southwest winds. Temperatures continuing to cool gradually. Also increasing threats of moisture throughout the night here, especially in the mountainous terrain or out along the coast, with low clouds and fog there on the increase for Kodiak Island. And this front pushing eastward, so a pretty good band of rain will push into at least the western to maybe central Tanana Valley, definitely up across the Yukon Flats and the southern slopes of the central to eastern Brooks Range to the North Slope. Another trough swinging in, picks the rain back up along with some gusty winds, but not nearly as strong on those winds as they were when the original front went through, but still keep it gusty and wet with a trailing edge back down along the Yukon Delta coast. And this front slowly slipping southward here, kind of a split in the jet stream, so really slowing it up, beginning to tear it apart a little bit. Weak trailing edge back to the Pribilofs on into the central Aleutians. And for tomorrow, that weakens into a trough portion, weakening and pushing eastward here, so mostly cloudy skies. Areas of light rain or showers pretty common here over the eastern Tanana Valley from the Alaska Range northward. Just a chance of some showers now south of the mountains. Could be a partly sunny afternoon, possibly for Cook Inlet and Matanuska Valley. Looks like most of the rain will stay from the northern Susitna Valley at this point in time northward or back along the Alaska Range. And that'll be sliding and slipping on into the Bristol Bay area. And then just some light stuff back in this trailing edge back across the central to eastern Aleutians. Weak trough, very weak here, really not producing too much in the way of anything, just a little bit more low clouds, fog, IFR, St. Lawrence Island. Back to west of the Pribilofs, maybe in between tomorrow there. Possible breaks in the overcast, but don't count on it. And that condition also up across the western Seward Peninsula. Stays damp, cloudy, and a fair amount of moisture here up for the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, especially the east side there. Pretty gusty west winds continuing. Mostly sunny. We'll go for the southeast coast tomorrow and dry. Risk of a few showers up north there toward the, again, maybe Klondike Highway up toward the pass, but pretty isolated there back toward Yakutat. And dry for the North Gulf Coast. Again, maybe some showers early on for Prince William Sound. And then on Tuesday, that system kind of re-energizes there as an upper trough swings down and kind of enhances it with the ridging shifting off to the east there into the Gulf. So pretty good shower activity over the southern Alaska Range, southern Kuskokwim Valley, on down to Kodiak Island. Low stuff, fog, drizzle on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, northwest flow, following that in behind, another trough. For low clouds, fog, and drizzle for the Pribilofs, but maybe drying out to the north. See a little bit more in the way of clearing there with northerly flow over the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island. Maybe the western Seward Peninsula, but this trough here will keep it pretty unsettled and cool with lots of clouds there from Norton Sound and Nulato Hills northward in toward the Noatak Valley and northwest coast. But the eastern Arctic coast, not too bad there with diminishing winds and areas of low clouds and fog. That system now pushes in, so after 2 dry days in a row here for the southern southeast coast, look for more rain to move in, and that'll break out the showers over the central coast. And you'll probably get 3 dry days coming up for the northern panhandle from, say, roughly Sitka on up toward Juneau and to the Lynn Canal area. Temperatures down that way this afternoon in the mid-60s, 64 at Sitka, 62 at Klawock, otherwise upper 50s near 60 for the eastern areas on up to the north there, 64 at Yakutat, 59 Cordova, up to 64 at Valdez, but very nice conditions, 81 at Gulkana this afternoon, 76 McCarthy, also 81 at Tok and 80 both at Delta and Fairbanks. More clouds, cooler, 73 at Tanana. 84 degrees, that occurred at Thunderbird Falls this afternoon, and saw an 85 at Palmer. Otherwise, Willow and Big Lake up to about 80 degrees. 76 at McGrath, 74 over at Sparrowvon, and Bristol Bay, 66 here at King Salmon. Farther north, Fort Yukon, 75, about 10 degrees cooler back at Bettles. 55 at Anatuvik with rain, and lower 50s here for the Arctic coast to mid 50s over the north slope, but 45 at Kaktovik, and lower 50s to some cases lower 60s, as is the case at Buckland this afternoon with 61 degrees, but down 10 degrees at Nome. And for the Bering Sea, 49 there at St. Paul with 46 and Unalaska. Warmer though out west with temperatures near 60 both at Atka and Shimia. And Koliganek up to 71, as was Kodiak at the state airport. For the lows tonight, near 60 here, Yukon Flats down in the central Tanana Valley, cooling back into the 50s and eventually to the upper 40s out toward the coastline, mid 40s up along the western and central Arctic coast with 50s, mid to upper here, south central Alaska, lower 50s for the Panhandle, and upper 40s for the Alaska Peninsula Aleutians, mid 40s for the Pribilofs. Flying or highs tomorrow, a lot cooler into the 60s here, really struggling to push 70 now in the Susitna Valley, but it could happen, more likely though for the Copper River Basin, eastern interior. Maybe the upper Yukon Valley, upper 60s about sums it up though, with 50s north of the Brooks Range, 60s cooling to about near 60 or the upper 50s back toward the southwest coast. Mid-50s for the Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, lower 50s for the Pribilos, back into the mid-50s for the Aleutians, upper 50s, Alaska Peninsula, and 60s, mid to maybe upper there for the southeast coast. Starting out kind of marginal there for the Panhandle, areas of IFR here for the Prince William Sound area to about Cape Yakataga, and then lots of IFR here back to the southwest coast, pushing inland a fair way, especially across the Yukon Delta, almost up to the Kuskokwim Mountains, and in across all of Bristol Bay. More IFR up over the northwest coast from the Selawik Valley up to about the central coast. Widespread IFR farther to the west. Tomorrow afternoon, St. Lawrence Island south side all the way down into Bristol Bay and along the coast IFR. Back across the Pribilos, central western Aleutians. Marginal VFR right through the central interior, Prince William Sound, maybe the Talkeetnas, North Gulf Coast Mountains here. And VFR for the Panhandle, IFR mostly along and off the western and central Arctic coast. Passes shaping up like this. Anatuvik starting out marginal, becoming VFR throughout the day. And for the Adigan area, same trend, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, both VFR flying tomorrow for both passes. Lowest conditions on the western entrances. Same thing for rainy, marginal with the lowest conditions western approach. Windy, marginal VFR, north and south. And for Isabel, though, Isabel and Mentasta staying VFR tomorrow with dry conditions. Tonita also VFR. And for Portage, marginal VFR, could be some possible IFR here on the eastern entrance, but I think there'll be enough early on, but I think there'll be enough westerly flow there to keep that off to the east, so just marginal. And that'll be throughout the entire day. For Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, warmest out here over the Bering Sea, the upper level ridge kind of retreating back here with the ridging part of the ridge slipping off to the southeast. So still about 10,000 feet to 12,000 feet over Bristol Bay early tomorrow morning. And that whole pattern again shifting off to the east, but even up to the north there, not all that cool, 8,000 feet still up along the Arctic coast. Icing threats with that weakening front coming in right through this area, some areas of rime icing possible, maybe very isolated moderate, back up on the eastern Arctic coast, and then from the Cape Newnham area on down with the main frontal boundary there, as weak as it is, to the eastern Aleutians. Jet stream showing that west-northwest flow out of the Russian Far East, splitting right in this area. That's kind of a weakening effect on that front, with one portion heading south or northeast here, and then that tending to split the front here, actually slow it down, but the whole pattern shifting east-southeastward. So on Tuesday, that upper trough will actually kind of reinvigorate it there, and it'll push across Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island. For the 9,000-foot winds, westerlies 30 to 45 tomorrow here over the central to northeast interior from the White Mountains there, all the way up to the Arctic coast, 35 to 40 knot westerly winds, diminishing back to 15 there to the west. Light 5 to 10 knot winds for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, South Central Alaska. Northwesterlies maybe up to 25 knots over the Aleutians, and coming down to 3,000 feet. Bering Sea and along the Aleutians, west-northwest, 20 to 25 knots, lighter to the south there toward the ridge. Westerlies at 20, trying to push into Bristol Bay, 15 to 20 knot westerlies over the northern Bering, and that area strong winds now from 3,000 feet, mostly from the Yukon Flats on up to the central eastern Arctic coast, 30 to 40 knot winds there, much lighter down across the Copper River Basin, really light variable winds over the southeast coast. And for turbulence, with those strong winds, moderate pretty likely, especially for small aircraft below 5,000 feet, roughly Point Lay eastward all the way toward the Mackenzie River Delta, southward across the eastern Brooks Range, a good portion of the North Slope, all of the eastern Arctic coast, light to isolated moderate chop extending southwestward there into about the middle Yukon, Kuskokwim River Valley areas with no turbulence expected to the south. Possible light to isolated moderate chop out over the far western Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back to look at the ice edge and the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
And we love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread.
Right.
The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt.
Sure.
So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing.
Okay.
That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
That sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture, and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels.
Okay.
And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then.
Sure.
And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano
it is
going off.
erupting. Yep.
Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength?
What is a wavelength?
That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths.
Okay.
But it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there.
Okay.
So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns.
All right.
All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue.
Wow.
The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another.
Very interesting.
It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the North Slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood.
Sure.
In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. it's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job.
Sure.
Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far. I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing, and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Westerly winds pushed sea ice free, or actually this is, sea ice free right through here. Eastward, well eastward, there's still a patch of some heavier stuff right about there, but this area here is anywhere from 1 to 4/10 ice coverage, maybe 5/10 in some areas, but those westerly winds really beating up on what's left of the ice down toward the coast, and that'll continue here for the next several days. On to the marine forecast, light northwest breezes here along the coast for the Panhandle tomorrow. Seas down to 4 feet, the entire stretch of the coastline. Light variable winds, central southern inside waters 10 knots or less, 2 to 3 foot seas. South 20 in the afternoon, northern Link Canal with 4 foot seas. And that drops back to just 15 there for northern Link Canal with 3 foot seas. Otherwise, kind of a south-southeasterly breeze at 10 on down to the south with seas still pretty slight. Northwest 10 to 15 on the south coast, 4 to 5 foot seas there, really laying down up here on the north coast, west-northwest at 10, barely even a breeze with 3 foot seas. Prince William Sound, light variable winds tomorrow, seas 2 feet or less, southwest 10 increasing to 15 knots, western North Gulf Coast of the Barrens, on down the east side of Kodiak Island, southwest 20 for Shelikof Strait. Small craft advisories out again here for Cook Inlet, south turning southwest north of the Forelands, 25 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas. Outlook for Tuesday, those come down considerably, especially north of the Forelands here, 10 knots out of the southwest, 15 south of the Forelands, 15 knot winds, Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island for Kachemak Bay and the Barrens, North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound, all light and variable with seas just 2 to 3 feet. Bristol Bay tomorrow, southwest 15, a little brisker here down the coastline on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula at 20 knots. South side, northwest 15 becomes light and variable from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. Then for Tuesday, those winds become west at about 15 knots, picking up a little bit, and then northwesterlies, Castle Cape to Cape Sarachef. West winds 15 knots, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, including Bristol Bay with seas running about 4 to 5 feet. Southwest 20 knots for the Fox Islands, 4 to 6 foot seas there. About the same out to Adak and Atka here, and then turning west and then back to southwest, but all at 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Tuesday, no change out here to the west. Southwest 20 knots out from, say, Kiska Island to Shimianatu. Otherwise, west winds at 20 to about Adak. Northwest 15 to 20, roughly around Atka, eastward here. More in the 15 knot range across Unalaska Island, with those seas staying slight, just 4 to 5 feet. And for the southwest coast, southwest 15 to 20 tomorrow. 20 knot southwesterlies for the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island, 15 knot winds for St. Lawrence Island, 5 to 6 foot seas. And then for Tuesday, westerlies 20 knots St. Lawrence Island, otherwise 15 knots out of the west, turn northwest here south of Nunivak Island, seas 4 feet, 5 foot seas with 15 knot westerly winds for the Pribilofs. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea, or central and eastern, actually the whole coastline up there, west and possibly southwest, 25 knots, so small craft advisories, 4 to 7 foot seas there, falling back to 20 knots from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson to Wales, west at 15 with 5 foot seas. Those turn north out there, 10 knots on the west coast, up to 20 knots from Cape Beaufort on down, becoming northwest on into Kotzebue Sound, probably turning westerly here as you get into the eastern area there, say blowing in towards Selawik. Otherwise, the east side of the Arctic coast still looking pretty brisk. Those winds were west at 30 knots, at least to start with, but that'll probably be diminishing Tuesday afternoon. Otherwise, tonight, pretty windy and wet up there with this front pushing eastward, taking the heaviest amounts of rain with it eastward into the interior. Another shot coming in from the west with that trough, trailing edge of the front there, moisture clouds. Not much in the way of wind, though, with just low IFR conditions and drier for the panhandle. And low clouds, fog, possible drizzle along the North Gulf Coast, maybe some showers developing here, southern Kenai Peninsula, western Susitna Valley. Most of the rainfall should stay north, or from the northern Susitna Valley on up to the north. And then for tomorrow, that front continues to weaken. Precipitation field really kind of breaking up into a showery pattern with mostly cloudy skies. And a little more extensive here, but pretty light in the precip with IFR, and mostly clear, possible sunshine Kodiak Island, which gets replaced with rain the next day as that whole system drops southeastward. This trough brings more rain into the southern panhandle, light rain. Doesn't look very heavy at all, while the northern areas will see probably their third dry day in a row. Otherwise, clouds and showers southern Alaska.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.